Today's Ancient DOS game is a really short and really simple one. Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, The Adventures in Nimnul's Castle. Although I left the subtitle out of the episode title because really, there's only one Chip and Dale game for DOS, so it doesn't really matter. As you probably figured out from the name, this game is based on the Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers cartoon, where two chipmunks, known as Chip and Dale, go around trying to solve crimes along with the assistance of two mice, Gadget Hackwrench and Monterey Jack, as well as a housefly known as Zipper. Now, most people are going to be familiar with the NES take on the series, which came out the same year as this DOS game, as the NES version was a two-player co-op platformer, with a lot of areas to visit and a fairly low level of difficulty, only increasing a little in the final levels. Also had a fairly decent soundtrack too, if I recall. This DOS game, however, is nothing like what came out on the NES. Heck, it doesn't even feature the same regular villain, as the NES game went for Fat Cat, while the DOS game went with Professor Norton Nimnul. In terms of this game, though, it's about as easy as the NES game, but a lot shorter. You can basically beat this thing in just over 10 minutes once you know what you're doing. So there's not really going to be much to say about it, but I can at least go over the basics. Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, The Adventures in Nimnul's Castle was developed by a company known as Riedel Software Productions, or it could be Riedel, and it was published by High Tech Expressions in 1990. And it's a one-player action game with support for CGA 4 color and EGA 16 color graphics running at 320 by 200 resolution, though it only supports the PC speaker for sound effects. You'd think they'd have at least done a rendition of the theme song for the PC speaker, but no music to be found anywhere in this thing. As for its current release date, it's still commercial and never got released digitally, at least as far as I can tell. Although physical copies aren't too difficult to come across, with fully boxed copies ranging between about $10 to $20, at least from what I could find. And keep in mind too that not all releases of the game came with both a 3.5-inch disc and a 5.25-inch disc, as some boxes only contained one or the other. So make sure to check that when searching for a physical copy so that you get the specific disc type that you want. Again, going to skip on the story section as it's really basic. One of the rescue rangers, Monterey Jack, falls for a cheese-baited trap and has been taken prisoner by the evil Professor Norton Nimnul. In order to conduct the rescue, Gadget needs to finish building a flying machine using parts found in the Doctor's castle. Chip and Dale does head to the castle to find the parts, while Zipper flies back and forth from the castle to deliver the parts that Chip and Dale find to Gadget. The game is split into 3 sections, each section itself being split into 3 levels. So the game essentially has just 9 levels to complete. Levels 1, 2, and 3 happen outside of the castle, where Chip and Dale need to dodge slime globs being fired from the castle, as well as robotic guard dogs. Once inside, levels 4, 5, and 6 involve climbing up the human-sized stairs while Chip finds parts along the way and hands them to Dale so he can take them to Zipper off-screen, dodging fireballs at the same time as they come down from some candles up top. Levels 7, 8, and 9 take place in the Doctor's lab, where one of his more iconic contraptions from the series is attempting to grab at Chip as he swings across the ceiling. Again, Chip simply needs to get the parts and drop them down to Dale below. Once you beat level 9, you win the game and get your final score. In the first 3 levels, where you're dodging the slime and robo-dogs, it may actually seem a little unfair how some of it times out. The trick is that the collision detection is not only extremely forgiving, but it can only trigger when Chip and Dale are stationary between their movements. Now with that in mind, slime balls can only hit you when they reach their final frame of movement. So to dodge a slime ball headed right for you, just be climbing in or out of the pit when it hits, and the collision won't be triggered. The dogs can only hurt you if their mouths run into you, so you can climb out of a pit that they're right over top of, so long as you climb out behind them instead of in front of them. I should also point out that there's a bug with the collision detection here when climbing out of a pit backwards, which causes the dog to check the collision position as in front of the pit behind the one that you're climbing out of. So be careful about that. In the next 3 levels, the only danger are the fireballs, which come from above. Now, one trick you can use here to avoid getting hit is that the fireballs never target the exact same place twice in a row, nor can they target the extreme edges. So, as long as you're running towards a spot which is going to be hit by a fireball, you'll actually greatly reduce the chance you'll get hit by the next one, since it's not going to go into exactly that spot. I should also point out that Chip moves slower once he's carrying a part, which, yeah, I know they look like screws, but the game calls them parts, so I imagine they just made them look like something generic, either for simplicity or time. And certainly not for disk space, as I checked the file sizes, and they should have had about 40 kilobytes left to work with. When Dale comes along, you can drop a part to him simply by holding down. Now, this doesn't need to be timed perfectly or anything. As long as you're holding down when Dale runs underneath, Dale will stop to catch the part as it falls, and Chip won't actually drop it anyways until Dale's ready to catch it. Now, Dale is being chased by a robo-dog, but the timing's been done in such a way that I'm pretty sure Dale can never actually get caught. The final 3 levels play very similarly to the staircase levels, except it's almost impossible to dodge the grabbing hands if you're right where they want to move to. So figuring out the pattern of where they want to go is essential. The patterns are not random, and while the first couple patterns are easy to remember for level 7 and 8, the pattern for level 9 takes a bit of practice. Again though, just like with the fireballs prior, the hands will never reach for the same spot twice in a row. Plus, all 3 sequences begin with the exact same 4 positions. Also, it may seem like the very first hand to come out when these levels start can't be dodged, but the trick is to just not move at all until it does its thing, and you'll be fine. Now, that's it for the basic gameplay, but there's a few interesting things I noticed while playing through this. Now, firstly, you only get 3 extra lives, and there's no way to get more. If you run out of lives, the game is over. Which all seems fair and normal, but the game also ends when you clear the last level, as opposed to repeating from the beginning like a lot of other games of this nature with a score counter. This creates an interesting conundrum where there's a minimum winning score of 7,925. Which equates to 25 points for each of the 17 pits you have to dodge in the first few levels, and then 250 points each for all 30 parts that you need to deliver to Gadget. 25 times 17 is 425, 250 times 30 is 7,500. Add them together, you get 7,925. However, in the first 3 levels of the game, you can enter the pits multiple times, and each time counts as 25 points. So you can win with an even higher score if you just grind going back and forth among the pits. As you can see, if you do this long enough, you can build up quite a lot of points, and then you can proceed to win the game with over 10,000 points, which I thought might give an extra life, seeing as how it seems as though the extra lives counter does have room for up to 5 lives, but no extra lives to be found here. In fact, I get the distinct impression from playing this game that it was cut short in development, or rather, the devs knew that there was a tight time limit or budget to reach, and so they built the game in such a way that it could be modular. With the right amount of time and money, they just simply add more pieces to make for a bigger game, but ultimately only got 3 sections in. I don't have any evidence to confirm this theory of mine, even after hacking the game's graphic files and scanning through them for unused content, but I have a couple strong points of argument, such as the space for up to 5 lives if the game only ever gives you 3 at most, though another point of argument is that you don't actually get to break Monterey Jack out of the castle. Gadget just goes and rescues him in one quick static image. And yet another point of argument is that you only ever see Nimnul in the first 3 levels, as he's the one throwing the slime at you. So there's no real showdown with the evil mastermind of the whole ordeal. I don't know, I just get this feeling that there were plans to put more in this game if the constraints allowed for it. One last thing to point out too is that the cutscene graphics are actually pretty well done considering the limitations of EGA. I'm trying to fit this game into 360 kilobytes of disk space. Although if you ever get a game over, the game doesn't actually tell you. All it does is show Chip, Dale, and Gadget looking defeated. This is particularly confusing since if you get a high score, it tells you you're a hero regardless of if you beat the game or not. Overall, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers: The Adventures in Nimnul's Castle has decent graphics and plays pretty well. For about 10 minutes. This thing is way too short, and has virtually no replayability on top of that, short of seeing how long you can grind pits to bump up your score. Even by early 90s standards, paying full price for a game that only provides a tiny amount of gameplay certainly would have annoyed a lot of DOS gamers. Now, one could argue that the game may have been intended for kids, but my counter-argument to that is that this game came out of High-Tech Expressions, who were notorious for pushing out numerous short licensed games every year, ranging in quality from decent to just plain terrible. This one feels like a piece of a good game, not a full game. So I would say it's worth playing at least once if you get the chance, but it certainly would not have been worth full price back in the 90s. Yep, setting this up in DOSBox is a piece of cake. Just leave cycle set to auto and you're good to go. Anywho, that's all for today's episode of Ancient DOS Games. Episode 218 will be on Saturday, July 15th, and we'll be taking a look at a game where if you accidentally kill an innocent bystander, you're actually forced to attend their funeral. Yeah, I got a funny feeling this is going to be a weird one, but in any case, if you think you know of a game with a feature that bizarre, then be sure to send your guess to adg@pixelships.com, and stay tuned not only to see the game, but an unboxing of the game too. Thanks for watching, everyone, and special thanks to those of you supporting me on Patreon. Here's just a small sample of you guys. This DOS game, however, is nothing like what came out on the NES. Heck, it doesn't even feature the same regular villain. Villain? Villain? Regular villain. I should start keeping a log of words I accidentally invent.